Progress.
Okay, we're up to Ayin Amid Beis. I think it's about 8 lines from the bottom and 12 lines to the bottom. Tanya. So, yesterday we got into a discussion about if you have an Uber that dies in his mother's womb, and the vet touches the Uber, the farmer touches the Uber, is the Uber going to give off tumah? Because dead animals give off tumah. So the Mishnah said that if everyone agrees that if it's tahar animals, it's not going to give off tumah because the animals, if you check the mother, you eat the fetus that's dead inside. It's part of the mother, so it's definitely not going to give off nevela. But when it comes to a non-kosher animal, it's machlokes tanoim. And we said yesterday that Rav Yossi's shita that it gives off tumah is from the following pasuk. It says nefesh shatiga b'chol davar tamei oy benivos chayet tameya oy benivos behemoth tameya benivos sheretz tamei. That if a person touches b'chol davar tamei oy benivos chayet tameya, he looks at it as that the baby is in the mother's womb. Meaning, the pasuk is specifying that there's tumah by nivlos chayet tameya, nivlos behemoth tameya, nivlos sheretz tamei. So we said yesterday, what about a regular behemoth tameya that dies? There's also tumah, so why is it not itemized? So it must be this is what it's referring to. Fine. So Tanya, Rav Yonis says, Namti leil ben Azai. I spoke to Ben Azai, and I said to him as follows: Lamanu nivlas behemoth tahira shemitama. I have a pasuk that says that if a nevelas behemoth tahira is a cow, kosher animal, and it dies, I have a pasuk that says that it's tameh. Okay. And nevelas behemoth tameya shemitama. And there's a pasuk that says a behemoth tameya that dies is also matama, like a lion or not a lion, like a behemoth tameya. It's a chayet tameya. Okay, maybe chazer. I'm sorry, chazer. Nevelas chayet tameya shemitama. And I have a pasuk that says that if a chayet tameya dies, that's a wild lion, it's a wild animal, lion, bear, that they die, it's also matama. But nevelas chayet tahira loy lamanu. But there's no source in the Torah, because we had yesterday that pasuk, it lists all of them. The only thing it doesn't list, out of all the pasukim in the Torah, a chayet tahira, a deer that dies. Where's the source that it's tameh? So Menayan, so he says, the pasuk we had yesterday, normally he says, kol hoylech al kapav, b'chol hachaya ha'ilechas. The pasuk says, kol hoylech al kapav, which is an animal that walks with paws, not hooves, so it's a non-kosher animal. B'chol hachaya ha'ilechas. So we said yesterday what that means is that if a non-kosher animal is inside its mother, who's a non-kosher animal, dies, it's metama according to Rav Yossi. He's teaching the pasuk differently. He's looking at two separate things. Kol halech al kapav is one thing, that if an animal has paws and it's non-kosher, it dies, it's tama. And then bichol hachaya, in all the chayas, meaning including all chayas, bichol hachaya, that's to include all chayas. They're also matama, whether they're tahar chayas that die, whether they're tamei chayas that die. So he's teaching the pasuk not as what we referred to yesterday of a fetus inside a mother, but just tamei chaya. So namti loy, I said to him, v'chinemer v'chol chaya, haloi nemer ela bichol chaya. So then I responded to him, no, that's not what the pasuk is for. The pasuk is not telling me that if a kosher chaya dies that it's matame, but rather it's what we said yesterday. L'mahalchich kapayim b'chayahu da'aseh. It's referring to a non-kosher animal that dies inside its mother's womb. And it's referring to that. It's the paws, right? The paws in the floor, whatever it is. We had yesterday. So it's not to tell me that a chaya that's tahira that dies, there's tumah. Because we already used the pasuk for what we said yesterday. So says the Gemara, so namli, so he responded, Umay Yishmael Omer b'davar zeh. What does Yishmael say? Rabbi Yishmael, he referred to him as Yishmael because he wasn't his Rabbi. He says, so what does Yishmael, your Rabbi is Rabbi Yishmael, what does he have to say about this? So he says like this. Namtila, I responded like this. The pasuk says that if a behema were to die, zu behema tameya. That's a reference to a non-kosher behema, like a chazer. Ashahilachem la'achla, zu behema tahira. So this pasuk is telling us that there's tumas nevela when a kosher behema dies, when a non-kosher behema. Now we're trying to figure out a chaya. So he says, this is what I heard from Rabbi Shmuel, a rule. Lamanu chaya b'chol behema, behema b'chol chaya. We have a rule throughout Shas that behemas and chayas are the same. The halach is that when the pasuk says behema, it also includes a chaya, and vice versa. So because I have a pasuk that says that a behema that dies is metame, so too that's my source for a chaya. And Rabbi Shmuel explained further, chaya tahira b'chlal behema tahira, chaya tamei b'chlal behema tamei. That whenever the Torah says behema, if it's a kosher behema, that includes a kosher chaya. If it's a non-kosher behema, that includes a non-kosher chaya. And he explains further, behema tamei b'chal chaya tamei, behema tahir b'chal chaya tahir. So now he's going to explain what the source is. But Rabbi Shmuel had this rule that whenever the Torah says behema, it includes chayas. And whenever it says chayas, it includes behemas. So the fact that there's a pasuk that says that a behema dies, that it's metama, so too there's your source for a chay. So this was Rabbi Yonasan here. Rabbi Yonasan is saying this to Ben Azai, because Ben Azai said, what does the Shmuel say? So he tells us to Ben Azai. Ubeloshin is Amrli, and then Rabbi Ben Azai responded, Chaval Ben Azai shleishimis is Rabbi Shmuel. It's Chaval, I didn't go to Rabbi Shmuel shir. Notice he calls him Rabbi Shmuel because now we hear Torah from him, and now he's a Rebbe. He says, oh, Chaval, I didn't learn by him because that's very, very impressive. Now the Gemara is going to speak out what's the source that a chaya and behema are inclusive of each other, and regarding which additional halachas do we say that if it applies to a behema, applies to a chaya, and vice versa. So chaya b'chlal behema minola. What's the source that when it says behema it includes chayas? Dichsiv, because the pasuk says zois ha-behema, it says behema, and then what does it describe? Shar said those are behemoths, and then it says ayil tzviva yachmor. Ayil and tzvi are chayas. So the pasuk begins with behema and then ends up describing chayas. What's the answer? Behemoths and chayas are the same. Okay, it's that chaya b'chal behema. Now behema b'chal chaya. That's how you know that when it says behema it includes chayas. How do you know vice versa? When it says chayas, it includes behemoths as well, because it says zois hachaya asher toichlu mikol habehema asher la'aretz. Kol mafresas parsa. The pasuk says zois hachaya asher toichlu. Right. This is the chaya, and then it describes the simanim of behemoths, split hooves, chewing its cud. So the Gemara says, okay, it's that. How do you reconcile this? Behema b'chal chaya. The Gemara continues further. Chaya tahira b'chlal behema tahira. So now, what's the halachas that they're the same? We're saying they're the same. That chayas that are tahar are the same as behemoths that are tahar, and vice versa. Chayas that are tmeya are the same as behema tmeya, and vice versa. Regarding which additional halachas, there's construction over here. I apologize. So the Gemara says regarding which additional halachas? Yes, it's regarding the tumah that we've already known. But which additional halachas? So chaya tahira b'chlal behema tahira. A chaya tahira is included in the description of behema tahira l'simanim, because the Torah says what are the simanim of a kosher behema? Split hooves and chewing its cud, and that's the same simanim for a kosher chaya. The chaya tameya b'chlal behema tameya, and when the Torah describes a behema tameya, it includes a chaya tameya. Regarding which halachas? Says the Gemara laharba regarding crossbreeding. The Torah forbids klayim. Klayim is mixing breeds. You're not allowed to mix breeds. The Torah itemizes it by behemoths, but the truth is it applies to chayas as well. The same way you're not allowed to crossbreed a bull and a goat, you're also not allowed to crossbreed a deer and an ibex, whatever it is. That's for the kosher comparisons. Now, behema tameya b'chlal behema chaya tameya. Now, the behema tameya and the chaya tameya are in the same regarding which halachas that it's included in chaya tameya. Look at the Rabbi. It's for the teaching of Rabbi. What's the teaching of Rabbi? The Tanya, Rabbi Omer. Now, the pasuk says like this. This is a pasuk regarding carbon oil v'yorid. The pasuk says by the oil v'yorid, which is a carbon that you have to bring, and it depends on how much money you have. Do you bring a smaller animal, like a bird, or leading up to a behema, a larger animal? Now, the pasuk says, Nefesh ashatiga b'chol davar tamei. If a person touches something that's tamei, or eats a chaya tameya, or benivos chaya tameya, or touches a chaya tameya, or benivos behema tameya. So behema and chaya, listen. It says if you touch them, v'hu tamei, v'ashem, and you did something wrong, meaning I touched these behemas or chayas, I'm now tamei, and then v'ashem, I did something wrong. Now, what did I do wrong? That's the question. What did I do wrong? So the pasuk never actually says what you did wrong. Is it just that you're metame? You bring a carbon because you're tummy. You don't bring a carbon because you're tummy. You did something wrong. Now, what did you do wrong? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Omer ekrani chaya behema lamenemer. So Rabbi says like this. Let me say it outside. Rabbi says this pasuk. Once you say that you touch a chaya tameh, why do you have to mention that you touch a behema tameh? I get it. You touch something that makes you tameh. Why does the pasuk have to say this? The answer is the word behema is extra because it's Xer Shava to illuminate what you did wrong. It says the word behema over here. The Gemara says behema lama nemra. Nemra kan behema. V'nemra la'alon behema tameya. It says the word behema over here. And it says the word behema in another area regarding eating karbanos. Ma la'alon tumas kodesh. Af kan tumas kodesh. Just like over there it's talking about karbanos, so over here it's karbanos. So the extra word behema is telling me what you did wrong. You became tameh by touching a chay or touching a behema, and then you ate a carbon. So the carbon that you bring is because you ate karbanos in a state of tuma. So that extra behema then illuminates chaya. So this source that chaya and behema are the same is regarding this halacha to tell me which avera you did that would warrant a carbon oil, and that is touching a behema or a chaya tameya and then eating karbanos. Malon tumas kodesh, avkan tumas kodesh. That's the source of behema tameya and chaya tameya being included in each other, because the extra word behema now includes a chaya as well. Behema tahira b'chlal chaya tahira, and included in chaya tahira is also behema tahira liyitzira. That's referring to yitzira. What do I mean? The pasuk, when it says the word, when Hashem created Adam Rishon and Chava, it says veyitzar, yitzira. Now we find the word yitzira by a chaya as well. We don't find the word yitzira by a behema. So the Gemara is saying that included in chaya is behemas. Now, regarding, so the meaning, in other words, the pasuk says vayitzer Hashem l'kim adam kol chayes asada kol efes shemayim. So you see the word vayitzer by a chaya. We have a yitzer by people. We don't have a yitzer by behema. So chaya is included behema. So now we have a yitzer by behemas as well. What is an afkamina that you have a yitzer by behemas as well? I'll tell you. We know that if a woman gives birth to a child or even miscarries a child, she now has, there's tumah and tahara. There's days of tumah, there's tahara. Difference between a male and a female. It's not for now. Let's say a woman gives birth and the fetus doesn't look like a person. It looks like a behema or a chaya or a bird. So the Tanakama Shita, Rameir Shita is, the Chachamim say it has to look like a person. If it doesn't look like a person, there's no tumah tahara. The Rameir Shita is anything that the Torah describes as vayitzar, so that's people, now chayas, birds, and now behemoths as well. Anything that gives birth that looks like a vayitzar has a tumah tahara. So that's the nafkamin of having vayitzar is regarding this halacha. So the Gemara says the Tanan hamapeles min behema chay va'oif bein tameim bein tahirin, whether it's a kosher behema tameya, a non-kosher behema tameya. In progress. Sorry, I had to move locations. So the point is, it says Rav Meir, if the woman miscarries and it's the fetus looks behema chay, whatever it looks like, you're going to be all the halachas, and that is, if it looks like a zachar, the shall have the laws of a zachar. If it looks like a nekeva, shall have the laws of giving birth to a nekeva, and all the tumah that applies. Im zachar teshel zachar, im nekeva teshel nekeva ein yedua. Let's say you don't know what it looks like, male or female. Then teshel zachar and nekeva, you have to be machmer like both a zachar and a nekeva. The point is, where does our mayor get it? Says Rashi, where does our mayor get it from that if it looks like a different species, the tumah applies? Because vayitzar, it says vayitzar by people, by chayas, by birds, and now by behemoths as well, and therefore Yitzhar applies to all Yitziras are the same in regarding these halachas. The Chachamim disagree, and they say, no, Kol she'en Metzuras Adam ein Vlad. The Chachamim say, no, Kol she'en Metzuras Adam ein Vlad. If it doesn't look like a person, then it's not, the Tumah do not apply. Now, just to finish up the sugya, the Gemara says, Ulu Rabbanan Haikra Lamali. What do the Rabbanan do with the pasuk? Now, Rashi explains, Taisus is Demal. Taisus feels that this is the Rabbanan we just mentioned, the Chachamim. Rashi says, no. The Rabbanan is actually a reference to yesterday's daf. Taisus doesn't understand why there would be a daf in between. That's very, very confusing. But according to Rashi, this is a reference to yesterday. That we had yesterday, the Rav Yosi Shita is that if you were to touch the uber that's inside the mother's womb, and it was a behema tameya, then it's metama. The Rabbanan disagree. They say, no, it's not metama by both by behema tameya and behema tahira. Rav Yosi feels that it's metama by behema tameya. And we said yesterday, what's the source for Rav Yosi? So we said, Kol hashatiga b'chol davar tamei, b'nivus chai tamei, b'nivus behem tamei, b'nivus sheretz tamei. So the question is, what do the Rabbanan do with that pasuk? Because they believe there's no distinction between behema tamei, uber behema tamei, and uber of a behema tahira. So what do they do with this pasuk? Kul l'ka Rabbi who also. The answer is, they say this entire teaching is for teaching of Rabbi that we just quoted. The Rabbi Shita is that this pasuk is extra to tell me what avera you did wrong that would warrant an oil of yored, and that is eating karbanos in a state of tumah after touching a behema nevelas behema tmeya or a chayat behema nevelas b'chayat tmeya, and that's what the pasuk is coming to. Okay, weiter. These dafim are pretty relentless. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. Okay. New Mishnah. The Mishnah says Ha'isha shemes v'lada, not Ha'isha shemes. Ha'isha shemes v'lada. You have a woman who lost her baby, who lost a fetus. And I'm assuming this is longer on into the pregnancy. B'toich me'ah, and the fetus is inside her woman. The fetus is not alive. Pashta chayes yada v'nagaba, and the midwife or the doctor is examining and touches the fetus that's not alive. Hachaya Tameya Tuma Shima. The fetus gives off Tuma that the woman, that the midwife or the doctor is now Tameh for 7 days for touching a dead body. Now the woman, the mother, is not Tameh. She has Tuma inside of her. It doesn't transmit Tuma automatically just by being inside until the mother gives birth. Then when the mother gives birth, as the fetus is leaving the body, it's Metame the mother. But the doctor is Metame by touching the fetus inside the womb. Now, the Gemara is going to start a discussion, and it's not going to come back to our Mishnah until tomorrow. The Gemara says like this, Amar Rabba, Keshem shetuma belua eina metame. Just like tuma belua is not metame. What does that mean? If, let's say, a person has a tamei object inside of them. So what does that mean? So we're going to talk about, there's two different ways for an item to be inside of you. One is through the mouth, and one is through the tochas. But we're going to go with the mouth. A person takes a ring that's tamei and swallows it. Now, when you have the ring going down your mouth, it touches your lips, now you're tamei. But forget about that. A person goes to the mikveh. He's tahar. Now the ring is still tamei because it's inside of him. It never went to the mikveh. The halacha is that ring that is tamei inside of him does not affect tuma to the rest of his body. So tuma belua eina metame. A tuma that's belua, a tuma that's swallowed up inside of you, does not transmit tuma while it's inside of you. So says Rabba, that we know, as we'll see. Kach tahara belua eina metame. So too, a tahara belua, a tahar object that is swallowed up by a person, does not become tameh by the person itself. Meaning, we look at the item inside and the person as two separate things. That could be lakula and lechumra. What does that mean? The same way, it's actually both lakula. The same way you can have tuma belua ein matame. That means that if you have a tameh ring that you swallow, the ring, while tameh, does not transmit tuma to the body. The person goes to the mikveh after touching the ring by his mouth, but let's say he goes to the mikveh, he is now tahar, despite the fact that he has a tummy ring inside of him. And by the way, when the tummy ring comes out of him, the tummy ring is tameh. Like he has to go to the mikveh. The same way a tuma balu is not matame, so to a tahara balu is not matame as well. Matame is not tameh as well. What do I mean? I swallow a tahar ring, and then I become tameh. I touch a dead body, whatever it is. That ring inside of me is not automatically tameh. I'm tameh, but not the ring. So the Gemara says, what's the sources for both of these? What's the source of tuma balua? So the Gemara says, tuma balua minano. How do I know that if I have a tummy object inside of me, it does not transmit tuma to the body? The pasuk says that if you eat nevela, you're tameh. Now why are you tameh? Not from swallowing, because you put it in your mouth. When you pick it up with your hands, you're tameh. Fine. So I take a piece of nevela, a piece of steak of a nevela. I take a bite. I swallow it. Now I'm tameh because it touched my lips. Fine. I go to the mikveh. I'm tahar, right? Let's say this happened right before nightfall. I go to the mikveh, second night falls, I'm tahar. What about the fact that I have a tameh piece of meat in my stomach? Right? I just ate it. It's not like it even broke down. It's not waste yet. I ate it 2 minutes ago. 2 minutes before Shkia, I pick up a piece of nevela, I'm tameh, I swallow it. I go to the mikveh, 2 minutes later, I'm tahar. Why? Because I was matahar myself. I had mikveh and I have nightfall. What about the fact that there's tameh inside of me and it's not broken down yet? So you see, tuma balu is not metame. Says the Gemara, Mila eskin de'achal samach l'shkiyas l'chama, u'kam rachmana tahar. So says the Gemara, wait a minute. So you're telling me, again, I take a piece of steak, that's tameh, I swallow it, I go to the mikveh, I'm tahar, even though the steak inside of me is tameh, it doesn't transmit tuma to the body. Why? Because tuma balu is not metame. The Gemara says maybe there's a different reason. Not because tuma balu is not matame, but maybe the second you eat it, it's not roy lachila anymore. Who would eat something that went through someone's body? It's not roy lachila. It's not food anymore. Even before it's broken down lagamri into waste, the second it goes down to the esophagus, it's not roy lachila. Dil mashani hasam d'lechaz leger. It's not roy lachilas ger. Right? For something to transmit tuma, for nevela to transmit tuma, it has to be roy lachila. It's not roy lachila. Now, it's definitely roy lachilas kelev, but we're assuming that for it to be able to transmit tuma, it's not enough that it has to be roy lachilas kelv. It has to be roy lachilas ger. It has to be roy lachila to a person, and it's not roy lachila anymore. So maybe the reason why it's not matama is not because tuma balua, it's just because food specifically, the second it goes down the throat, it's not roy lachila anymore. But if it was a ring, that maybe it would transmit tuma. Says the Gemara, Hanich l'Rav Yechon damar achazu l'kelev shapir el l'Rav parpe damar tuma chamur l'ger v'tuma kala ad l'kelev mishum d'lechaz l'ger. And the Gemara speaks it out. According to Rav Yechonon, that it's able to transmit tuma as long as it's roy lachilas kelev. then taka, it is roy lachilas keleb, so it should transmit tumah, and the reason why it doesn't is because it's tumah balua. But according to Bar Pedah, that says that for tumah chamura, which is tumas nevela, it has to be roy lachilas ger, so maybe the reason why it doesn't transmit tumah is not because it's not roy lachila anymore. Why isn't roy lachila? Even if I swallow a piece of meat, the second it goes down the stomach, who would eat such a thing? Says the Gemara, you're mistaken. It is roy lachila. Who would eat such a thing? The answer is they wouldn't eat it if they saw it come out of you. But if you took someone swallowed a piece of meat and then vomited it up, and then you rinsed it off and seared it, people would eat it. So it is roy lachila. Okay. So therefore, it is roy lachila. So why doesn't it transmit tumah? It must be because tumah balua ain't a matama. The Gemara says, so this is the source that tumah balua is not matama, is because if you swallow a piece of nevela and you go to the mikveh, the nevela does not transmit tumah to the body. So that's tumah balua is not matama. How do I know that tumah tahara is not tameh? Meaning, the opposite case, I ate something tahar and then I became tameh. The food inside of me or the ring inside of me does not automatically become tameh just being inside of me. Eshkichin tumah balua, tahara balua manol. And how do I know that we look at inside as like a separate entity to the point where it doesn't become tameh? Right? It doesn't transmit tumah. But how do I know that it doesn't become tameh? The Gemara says kal v'chomer. It's a kal v'chomer. What's the kal v'chomer? We're going to learn a kal v'chomer from cheres. Ma kli cheres hamukaf tzamid pasel. If you have a kli cheres that's covered and has tumah inside the kli cheres, the halacha is, and there's no airspace of a tefach, that covering on top does not stop. The tumah just shoots up. So you see, kli cheres is very, very easy to transmit tumah because the covering on top doesn't stop it. The tumah just goes up to Shemayim. And yet, what's the halacha? That's when the tumah is inside. But when the tumah is outside, the cover protects the inside contents. So you see that the tumah transmits very easily, and still it's protected. It protects the tar items inside when the tumah is outside of the seal. So kal v'chomer, if a cheres transmits tumah very easily when it's inside something, when the tumah is inside, it shoots up, and still it protects tahar. By the opposite case, where the tumah is outside of the container, it protects the items inside the container. The seal protects that the tumah does not go inside. By a person, it's kal v'chomer. If a person has tumah inside, we said it does not transmit tumah. So if the tumah does not shoot up, kal v'chomer, the person will protect the tahar inside. Meaning, in other words, if a kli cheres, there's tumah inside, it shoots up. It goes right through. If there's no tefach, airspace, it goes right through the covering, it goes up to Shemayim. And yet, if the tumah is outside, the seal protects the items, the tahar items inside from becoming contaminated. So kal v'chomer, a person who does not transmit tumah when the tumah is inside, right? It's not like a cheres which shoots up. The tumah inside, we said tumah balua is not matama. We said that if it's a tumah ring inside of you, it does not transmit tumah to the body. So kal v'chomer, the body should protect the tar inside items from becoming tameh. Damer mar tumah utzutza bekasa elorkia. Matzal atar shebetechem l'tama. Go to the next page. Adam shematzal tumah shebetechem l'tama. Einoi din shematzal atar shebetechem l'tama. So in other words, kli cheres is more tameh, and yet it still protects tahar items that are inside the container. So a person which is less tameh, kal v'chomer, the tahar items inside should be protected. So says the Gemara, wait a minute, you're telling me that a kli cheres, malik kli cheres, you tell me a kli cheres is more tameh, it's more, that's the chomer, and that's the other one is a kal. But what about a kli cheres? Ein metameh gavoy. A kli cheres does not become tameh by touching the outside. You have to touch the inside. A person does become tameh when you touch his outside, his skin. So you're telling me that the kli cheres is more severe, not in that halacha, not when it comes to tumah touching the outside. So the Gemara responds, yeah, when it comes to tumah touching the outside, kli cheres is more severe, but we're talking about tumah from the inside. And tumah from the inside, kli cheres, you're right, kli cheres is more lenient when it's tumah coming from the outside, but when it's tumah coming from the inside, kli cheres is more severe. The Gemara says, Atu anon megavoy kamrinon, mitoichi kamrinon, adarabba, kli cheres kamor, shekem mitam ma'aviroi. So, from the perspective, the Gemara says, "Metoichi kamrinon," and adarabba, I'll prove it to you that when it comes to tumah from the inside, kli cheres is way more severe because kli cheres chomer shekem mitam ma'aviroi. I'll tell you, I'll add to it. A kli cheres is the only thing that's tameh. You don't even have to touch the inside; just be in the airspace of the inside, it's tameh, and yet it still protects items that are inside when the tumah is outside. Kal v'chomer, a person. So that's the rule that. So we now have a rule that tumah balua is not matama. That is from every case of an avela that you swallow the avela, even that's still roy la'achila, and you go to the mikveh, your tahar, despite the fact that there's tumah inside of you. So tumah inside of you does not spread. That's when you eat an avela. And now Rabbi has extended it to a tahara balua as well, which means that if you swallow a tahar item and then you become tameh, you're also tahar. Meaning the item inside is still tahar, and that's learned out from a kavachemer from a kli cheres. So says the Gemara, good. These are good sources for swallowing. How do I know the same halachas apply if something goes up the tochas? That if something is placed up the tochas, it's the same halachas. Tameh item inside will not transmit tumah to the body, and a tahar item inside will not automatically become tameh by the body. Ashkechin beluah dil ma'ila, beluah dil matam and all. And how do I know the same halacha applies in the opposite case? Meaning that it's also considered a separate item. So the Gemara says kal v'chomer. Well, I'll tell you kal v'chomer. Umala ma'ila she'ena is ikol. Now, if when you swallow something, it does not digest the item right away, and still matzil, it still protects the item from transmitting and acquiring tumah. Meaning, in other words, which of the two, swallowing or up the tuchas, which one is more of like a breakdown? So the Gemara says, well, when you swallow it, meaning and breaking down, meaning that it's sort of separate from the body. So when you swallow it, it's not even broken down yet. So I should look at it as the same way it was outside of the body, and still it's protected from transmitting and mekabel tumah. Then the lower part of the body, which is accomplishes digestion and sort of is breaking it down, in a din shematzel, all the more so it should be protected. Because all the more so it should be looked at separate from the way it was on the outside. So it says the Gemara, I thought that digestion happens by going through the stomach. So you're telling me that there's more digestion in the tuchus area. That's true, but doesn't have to go through the stomach to get to that point. The Gemara says, true, but you still have to have a lot of digestion. The bottom part of the body still breaks down all items pretty quickly. So, okay, so we have a source now for swallowing and for the other way as well. For a person. Now the Gemara wants to know, how do you know the same halachas apply to an animal? How do I know the same halachas apply to an animal? Meaning, how do I know that if an animal, let's say, swallows something, the same halachas apply? So the Gemara says, well, kal v'chomer. Well, it's a kal v'chomer. Meaning, in other words, if the same halachas, if these kulas, these are kulas, if these kulas apply to a person, do you want to just pass me a tissue here? It's in the bathroom. So, in other words, if these halachas apply to a person, and these are kulas in that the tumah inside does not transmit to the rest of the body, or the tahara inside does not become tameh via the body, that if these kulas apply to a person, how do I know they apply to a behema as well? So the Gemara says like this. I'll tell you, it's a kal v'chomer. Which one is more severe in halacha? People or animals? So the Gemara says, well, people. Why? Because people can become tameh when they're alive. Animals cannot. You can't. An animal only becomes tameh when it's dead. A live animal can't become tameh. So if a person who is more chomer by tumah tahara, because they become tameh when it's alive, still these kulas apply. An animal kal v'chomer. So the Gemara says, Uma adam shemetam mechayim matzil bebelua behema shemetam mechayim in a din shematzil bebelua. So the Gemara responds, wait, you tell me which one is more severe when it comes to tumah tahara? People. I don't think that's true. Why? There's a special kula that people have that, as we'll see, does not apply to animals. And that is when it comes to entering a house with tsaras. Now, the halacha is that if you enter a house with tsaras, if an animal enters into a house with tsaras, he's tameh right away. Right the second he enters. If a person enters a house with tsaras, he's also tameh right away. But people have a special kula, and that is the clothing that you're wearing is not tameh right away. It's only tameh if you stay kedei achilas pras. Let's say kedei achilas pras is 5 minutes. You have to stay for 5 minutes. So that's a case where animals are tameh right away. People are not. At least the clothing on people's backs are not. So you see, you're telling me that people are more severe, and therefore it's a kal v'chomer. If these kulas apply to people, kal v'chomer, they apply to behemoths. Behemoths are not more lenient when it comes to tumah tahara, because when it comes to tsaras, they're more severe than people, because animals are tameh right away, and people are only tameh when the clothing on their back, when they're wearing it, when they're staying long kedei achilas pras. And if clothing is on the animal's back, let's say you leave clothing on the animal's back, it's tameh right away. But clothing on my back takes a couple minutes. So you see that people are not more severe when it comes to tumah tahara, at least for that halacha. So the Gemara says, "Mala adam shkein tsar shia bebeis hamanuga time behema she'ein tzricha shia bebeis hamanuga." So the Gemara says it's not true. People and animals are the same. Why? What's the halacha by Animals, they walk in, they're tummy right away. Anything on their backs, they're tummy right away. Great. What about people? People are tummy right away. The only thing that people have is that if they're wearing clothing, it's not tummy right away. But let's say a person is not wearing clothing. Let's say a person has clothing that's hanging over their shoulders, just on their back. It's tummy right away as well. The only difference is that regarding wearing clothing, there's a difference. But that just doesn't apply to animals because animals can't wear clothing. But everything that animals have, which is clothing on their body, meaning carrying clothing, that applies to people as well. If a person is carrying clothing, it's also tummy right away. Same way by animals. The only difference is that people have that kula that it takes longer to metame when they're wearing clothing. That doesn't apply to animals because animals can't wear clothing. But conceptually, the halachas are identical. Animals tummy right away, people tummy right away, yes. Animal has clothing on it, carrying clothing, tummy right away. People carrying clothing also tummy right away. The only difference is wearing. Well, wearing doesn't apply to animals. But that doesn't make it that animals are more severe. Every halacha that's shaykh to them, they're the same as people. People in general are more severe. And therefore, if Tumah Balua and Tahara Balua do not apply to people, Kal v'chaymer, they don't apply to behemoths as well. The Gemara says, Behemoth ein tzricha shivei semenugel l'may hilchasa, l'kelim shal gaba, adam nami leboy. The halachas of people and animals are the same regarding carrying clothing, just not wearing because animals can't wear clothing. The Tanan hanichas of semenugel, if a person enters a tzaras house, the kelim al ksev v'sandal v'tavas b'yado, and he's carrying his clothing, hu v'hein tamei miyad. He and his clothing are tummy right away because he's not wearing them. And that's the same thing by animals. And even if an animal were to put clothing on its back, it's not shaykh to wear clothing by animals. Hayalavush kelev. Only if the person is wearing his kelim, he's wearing the shoes and he has a ring on his finger, don't only has to wait in the place to get pras, which is enough to eat a pras of bread, of wheat bread, sitting down eating with relish. That's the only kula, but that it can't apply to animals because it's not shaykh. But everything that is shaykh, animals and people are the same. So Rabbi was mechadish, and today's daf, we'll finish up with this. Rabbi was mechadish that tumah belua is not metame. So if you swallow something that's tameh, it does not transmit tumah to the body automatically. And tahara belua is not metame. And if someone swallows something tahar and then becomes tameh, it does not automatically transmit to the item inside. And he learned it out from a svara and from a kavachem and from cheres. The Gemara ends off, Amar Rava. Rava asked a question to Rabba. Travayu Tanani. I don't understand. What do you need this for? You have to mechadish. It's all mishnayos. It sounds like it's a chiddush or Rabba. It's not a chiddush. Tumah Balua is not matame as a mishnah. Tahara Balua not become tameh as a mishnah. Tahara Balua tanin, it's all mishnayos. So what do you have to tell me this for? Now what's the mishnah? So Tumah Balua is a mishnah d'tanan. Bala tabas tameya. If a person swallows a tamei ring, now he becomes tamei because it touches his lips. But he's tayvel v'eichel b'trumasai. He goes to the mikvah and he eats truma. What about the fact that the ring is in his body that's tamei? It doesn't transmit tumah to the rest of the body. And hikia, and if by the way, if you were to vomit up the ring, then tamei umatamasai, the ring is still tamei because it never went to the mikvah. The ring never went to the mikvah, and when the ring touches its lips as it's leaving the body, it's also matame. So you see that Tumah Balua and Amatama is Mafurish and Mishnah. And Tahara Balua is also Mishnah. That if you swallow something tahar, it doesn't become Tameh via the body automatically. T'tnan. Bala Tabas Tahara v'nichas olamei. So someone swallows a tahar ring and then enters let's say a house with a dead body. So he's a Shana V'tava. So he's Tameh because he entered the dead body. Go to the mikvah, v'chulei, and then go to the Paraduma. I'm sorry, not the mikvah. Paraduma, the day 3 and day 7. Harei v'hikia, and then he spits up the ring. So the ring is still tahar. It didn't become tamei just by being inside the body when he was in oil amaze. So you see that Tumah Balua is already covered, Tahara Balua is already covered. So why did Rabba need to be mechadish this? So says the Gemara, Rabba said you're right. Tumah Balua, that if you swallow something tamei, it doesn't transmit tumah to the body, that's a Mishnah. Tahara Balua, if you swallow something tahar, it doesn't become tamei via the body, that's also a Mishnah. Rabbi says, I was mechadish that if you swallow them both at the same time, I swallow a tahar ring and a tamei ring at the same time, and they touch each other inside the body, that there's no transmission of tumah within the body, that's from me. Each one isolated, that's mishnayos. But I was the one who's mechadish that if you touch them, that if the transmission occurs inside the body, there's no transmission of tumah. Kikama Rabba kan shabala shtei tabayis. You swallow 2 rings, achas tamei v'achas tahar, one tamei and one tahar, and therefore they're together in the stomach at the same time. That the tahar ring does not become tamei by being next to the tamei ring inside the body. That was the chiddush of Rabba. And we'll see tomorrow, this has shaykhs to our Mishnah as well. I will stop here.